I never used to think of the lake as anything more than a calm, familiar place, somewhere I could slip away from work, from people, from every little noise that scraped my nerves. There was a kind of quiet here that didn't feel empty. It was peaceful in the way a childhood bedroom feels peaceful, soaked in memories you don't fully remember but can still feel when you stand in the doorway. I had been coming to Harlow Lake since I was a kid. My father taught me to tie my first knot here. I caught my first trout here. I kissed my first girlfriend on the little wooden dock that's barely standing now. The lake had seen me through every version of myself. That's why, when the weird stuff started, my brain refused to believe it for a long time. The night of the bobber should have been the first warning. But the thing is, when something bizarre happens in a place you trust, it's easy to laugh it off or push it away or blame the wind or the currents or literally anything that makes sense. Your brain tries to protect the world you know. Mine tried a little too hard. So here's what happened, exactly as I remember it, even though part of me still wishes I could pretend it was just a story I read somewhere. It was early September, warm but with that cool bite in the air that tells you fall is creeping in. I went out around 11 at night with my old aluminum rowboat, the one that has a dent in the side from where my cousin Jack rammed it into a submerged stump 15 years ago. The moon was a thin, pale hook, hanging so low it almost looked tangled in the treetops. I wasn't planning on staying out long, just wanted to unwind. Work had been brutal. My head felt packed with static, and the lake was my reset button. I rowed out a little past the center, where the water gets deep enough to swallow sound. I cast my line, settled back, and let the rocking of the boat smooth my brain out. For maybe an hour, it was perfect, nothing biting, but I didn't care. Sometimes the point of fishing isn't the fish. And then I saw it. At first I just noticed something faintly red drifting a little ways off. A bobber, one of those cheap plastic ones, red on top, white on the bottom. It was just sitting there on the glassy water, glowing softly with the moonlight. That wasn't weird by itself. People lost gear all the time. What was weird was the way it drifted. No ripples, no breeze, no current. But it moved. Not fast, not suddenly. Just glided. Smooth as if it were being pulled by an invisible thread. And what really made my stomach clench was the fact that it wasn't drifting randomly. It was coming toward me. I even laughed at first, because the idea of a bobber following me felt ridiculous. But the closer it got, the more wrong it felt. It stopped about 6 or 7 meters from my boat and just hovered there. Not sinking, not bobbing, perfectly still on perfectly still water. I remember muttering something like, "That's weird," under my breath, as if talking out loud would make it less creepy. I gave the water a tap with my oar, watching the ripple spread. When it reached the bobber, I expected it to rock, even a little. It didn't. It stayed frozen in place like it wasn't actually part of the lake. Something in my chest tightened. I told myself it had just snagged on weeds below the surface, even though this wasn't a shallow part of the lake. Still, I tried to ignore it. I cast my line again, forced myself to look away, and then I heard the faintest little tap, like someone flicking the side of a plastic cup. When I looked back, the bobber was closer, maybe 4 meters away now. I hadn't seen it move. I hadn't heard water. It was just there. That was when I felt the first jolt of real fear. Not panic, just that quiet, icy pinch at the base of my spine. Something was wrong, and I knew it in a wordless, animal way. I reeled my line in. Enough fishing for the night. When I grabbed my oars, I swear to God, the bobber moved again. Not toward me this time, just a little twitch, like something below had pulled at it. Like a bite, but it didn't sink. It just snapped a few inches sideways, then stopped dead. I rode, slow at first, because I didn't want to make noise. I don't know why I cared about noise, but that's instinct for you. And as I rode, I kept my eyes on that little red dot behind me. Every few seconds, I glanced back, and every single time, the bobber was keeping the same distance from my boat. Not gaining, not falling back, matching my pace. I rode faster. The bobber stayed exactly 6 meters away. I rode even harder, muscles burning, breath ragged. 6 meters. I tossed one oar into the water trying to speed up and didn't even stop to grab it. 6 meters. That's when I stopped rowing altogether and let the boat drift. The bobber drifted too. My mind was screaming with ideas it wasn't ready to believe. I grabbed my flashlight, clicked it on, and shone the beam directly at it. I expected it to reflect like normal plastic. Instead, the light seemed to sink into it. Not absorbed, just muted, like shining a flashlight at a dead eye. I don't know what possessed me, but I reached for my fishing rod and cast toward it. I think some survival part of me wanted to prove it was just a piece of plastic after all. The hook landed a few inches off. I reeled slowly, guiding the line toward it. And the moment the hook touched the water near the bobber, the line went taut. Not a little tug, not a bite. Full, rigid tension like I'd hooked a car. The rod bent so suddenly, I almost lost my grip. I braced my feet and pulled. Nothing moved. It felt like the lake had grown a spine and I'd snagged it. And then, worse, so much worse, the line gave a slow, steady pull in return. Something was dragging my line downward. Not fast, not jerking, not thrashing. Just a heavy, deliberate pull. Like whatever was down there knew exactly how strong it was. I cut the line. I actually pulled out my pocket knife and sliced it without thinking. As soon as the tension snapped, the bobber twitched once, then sank. Not drifted, not bobbed. Straight down as if someone had grabbed it from below and yanked. The water closed over it without a ripple. I don't think I breathed for 10 seconds. Then, all at once, I grabbed my remaining oar and paddled so hard my shoulders screamed. When I finally reached the dock, I didn't even tie the boat properly. I just scrambled out and ran to my truck. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my keys twice before I could start the engine. I didn't look back at the lake. I didn't want to see if the bobber had come back up. I wish the story ended there. I wish I could say it was a one-time freak incident that I've spent the years trying to rationalize. But 3 nights later, I found something on my doorstep. A bobber, red on top, white on the bottom. Wet. And not just from water, it smelled like the lake, like algae and decaying leaves and mud that's been buried too long. There was a long piece of fishing line tied to it, stiff and stained brown at the end like it had been dragged along the lake bed. I didn't touch it. I swept it straight into a garbage bag without letting it brush my skin. I told myself it was a prank. It had to be. Someone saw me out on the lake. Maybe. Someone messing with me. But nobody goes to Harlow Lake on weeknights except the regulars. And the regulars are all old-timers who think practical jokes are a waste of energy. The next morning, I checked the garbage bag. It was empty. No hole in the bag, no tear, nothing. Just empty. The bobber was gone. That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't been back to the lake since. I barely sleep. Every night I hear something faint tapping at my window. Not knocking, tapping. Like someone flicking the side of a plastic cup. And last night, when I finally worked up the nerve to look, I saw something red on the other side of the glass, hovering, perfectly still, exactly 6 meters from my bedroom window. I don't know how that makes sense. I don't know what wants me, or why. All I know is the bobber hasn't sunk. And I'm terrified of the day it finally does because I think whatever pulls it under might come up with it. I used to think lakes only held fish and mud and maybe a few ghosts invented by bored old men, but that was before Harlow Lake marked my kayak. Before something under the water made it clear that I wasn't just a visitor out there, I was being cataloged, claimed, recognized. That night, the air was warmer than it should have been for early September, thick and heavy like the whole forest had stopped breathing. I launched my kayak anyway because I'd had a bad week. My head was buzzing, and the lake was the only place I could ever disappear. For a while. It was around 10:15 p.m. when I reached the deep section where the trees that line the shore vanish into darkness and the water suddenly feels older, colder, hungrier. I had just set my line in when something tapped the underside of the kayak. Not a fish, not a bump from debris. It was a deliberate knock, like someone's knuckle rapping twice against a door. I froze, leaning over to check, but the water was black glass, smooth, perfect. A minute later, it came again, harder this time, followed by a dragging sound directly under me. My entire body went cold. I scrambled for my flashlight, shined it along the hull, and my breath stuttered when I saw the muddy handprint smeared along the side, huge, 5 long finger marks curling downward like something had reached up and gripped the kayak. Before I even processed it, another handprint rose out of the water on the opposite side, forming from dripping black mud as if invisible fingers were pressing up through the surface. I dropped my paddle, cursed, grabbed it again, and started rowing so hard I was splashing water everywhere. But as soon as I moved, the knocks under the hull multiplied. 3, 4, 5, traveling from the back of the kayak toward the front like something crawling underneath, keeping pace with me. I didn't care where I was going, I just aimed for the nearest slice of land. When I hit the shallows, I threw myself onto the shore and turned back. That's when I saw them handprints, dozens of them, all over the kayak, some huge, some small, all made of black lake mud. They weren't random. They formed a pattern, a spiral almost, converging toward the center of the hull like multiple things had been circling me beneath the water. I dragged the kayak onto land and checked the underside. My stomach turned. There were prints there too, layered on top of each other, some pushed so deep into the mud coating the hull that it looked like claws had nearly punctured through the cheap plastic. I left the kayak by the tree line and sprinted back to my car. I didn't look back once. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. 2 days later, when I walked out to my car for work, there was a muddy handprint on the driver's door. Same long fingers, same wet black mud that smelled exactly like the lake. That alone terrified me, but what really broke me was the realization that the mud wasn't smeared from someone touching the door. It looked like the hand had slid down, as if something tall had stood inches from my car in the middle of the night. I cleaned it off, tried to convince myself I'd imagined the pattern, but the next morning it was back, this time on the hood. I tried cameras, motion lights. None of them ever caught anything. The lights never triggered. The cameras always glitched or froze exactly between 2:13 and 2:16 a.m. every single night. Then, last week, I heard the tapping. Not on the kayak this time, on the walls of my house. Slow, rhythmic. The same knuckle-on-door cadence I'd heard under the lake. I thought someone was messing with me until I heard it coming from the back door, then the side door, then the windows, like something circling. I called the police twice. They found nothing. No footprints, no mud, no signs of forced entry. But every time they left, the tapping returned. 3 nights ago, while lying awake, I heard something on my roof. Heavy, wet, crawling. I wanted to run, but where was I going to go? At 3:12 a.m., the tapping stopped. I thought maybe it had finally left. until I heard something drip onto the floor near my bed. Thick, soft splats. I turned on my flashlight. Black mud. A handprint was slowly forming on the ceiling above me. I grabbed my keys, ran barefoot out of the house, and didn't stop until I reached my car. I drove until the sun came up, until my hands stopped shaking, until I convinced myself that daylight meant safety. But yesterday, the real twist hit something I didn't expect, something worse than the marks or the noises. I got a call from the rangers who patrol Harlow Lake. They told me my kayak had washed up at the far end of the lake. That didn't make sense. I had left it on land. They asked if I wanted to come pick it up. I told them no. They told me I should come anyway because something weird was on it. Against better judgment, I went. When I got there, my kayak was lying overturned on the shore. One of the rangers pointed at the bottom. The entire underside was clean. No handprints, no mud, as if nothing had ever touched it. But on the inside, the seat, the floor, the walls, there were marks. Hundreds of them, not just handprints. Finger streaks, drag marks, deep gouges like fingernails scraping plastic, all on the inside, as if something had been sitting in it, riding in it, waiting. The ranger asked if I had any idea what could have caused it. I lied. I said maybe vandals, maybe animals. But when I walked around the kayak, I found something tucked under the bungee cords at the front. A thin strip of paper. I pulled it out with shaking fingers and almost dropped it. On the paper, smeared in lake mud, was a single word written in huge shaky letters, "Inside." The ranger asked what it meant. I told him I didn't know. But the truth hit me on the drive home. The marks in the kayak weren't a warning. They weren't random. They were a message, a pattern, a progression. First, the bottom, then the sides, then my car, then my house, then my ceiling, and now the kayak itself, marked from the inside. Whatever is following me isn't just getting closer. It's telling me where it wants to be next, inside. And right now, as I'm typing this, I can hear the tapping again, this time from inside the walls, and the sound is getting closer to my door. I used to go night fishing at Lake Harlow because the water there always looked dead calm after midnight, like a sheet of dark glass that nothing could disturb. But now I know that calm isn't peace, it's hiding, it's waiting. And the night I saw the man standing on the surface of the lake is the night I realized something out there was pretending to be still. It was around 1:20 a.m. The air was cold enough to sting, and the fog had rolled in so thick it looked like smoke drifting off the trees. I was alone on the old wooden dock with my lantern barely glowing, and for a long time the only sounds were the gentle creaks of the boards beneath me and the rhythmic tapping of my lure hitting the water. I was packing up to leave when I noticed a shape out on the lake far at first. Just a vertical shadow in a world made of horizontal lines. And at first, I assumed it was a dead tree stump sticking out of the water. But then it moved, not fast, not jerky, just a small shift, like someone adjusting their stance. I lifted the lantern higher, and the fog broke just enough for me to see it clearly. A man, or at least the shape of one, tall and thin and perfectly motionless, standing on the lake like it was solid ground. He wasn't floating. He wasn't sinking. His feet were planted flat, like he was standing on invisible ice. And his body was turned directly toward me, even though I couldn't see a face. Just a darker patch where a face should have been. I froze, every muscle in my body winding tight, and I remember whispering, "Hello?" even though something in me already knew nothing human would answer. The man didn't react. He didn't tilt his head or breathe or sway with the wind. He just stood there as if he'd been waiting for me. I took one step backward on the dock, and the boards groaned loudly. The sound echoed across the lake, and that's when the man moved. Not with his legs, not by walking. He slid. His entire shape drifted across the surface in a straight line, fast but silent, leaving no ripples, no disturbance in the water, just closing half the distance between us in less than 2 seconds. I stumbled backward, nearly falling, and the lantern flickered violently as if something had passed between the flame and the air around us. I didn't breathe, I didn't blink, and he didn't stop. He slid again closer, this time close enough for me to see that where his hands should have been, there were long, dark shapes hanging too low, almost reaching his knees. And his feet weren't feet at all, but shadowy smears that didn't match the rest of the shape. I turned and sprinted toward the shore, the dock shaking beneath me with each step, and right before I reached land, I made the mistake of looking back. He was already at the end of the dock, standing perfectly still, watching me. I ran all the way to my truck, dove inside, slammed the doors, and peeled out of the parking lot so fast gravel sprayed behind me. My heart didn't stop racing until I got home. I told myself I'd imagined it. That fog had played tricks on my eyes. That exhaustion makes monsters out of shadows. But deep down, I knew better. And 2 nights later, I got proof. When I stepped outside to take the trash out, I noticed wet footprints on my driveway, too long, too thin, spaced too far apart to be human, and they stopped right at my front door as if something had walked up to it, stood there, and stayed for a while. The next morning, I found water pooled under my bedroom window. Not from rain, from something that had been standing there, watching. And water, you know, evaporates. But that puddle never did. It's still there. And sometimes, late at night, when the house goes quiet and the air turns unnaturally still, I hear wood creaking outside, slow, deliberate creaks. The sound of someone putting weight where there shouldn't be, anyone standing right above the spot where the puddle sits. I haven't gone back to the lake since, but I think the lake came to me. And whatever that man was, whatever that shape was, it isn't finished standing. I didn't sleep at all after the night I found that puddle under my window that refused to dry, and by the next evening I had convinced myself that maybe I'd imagined the creaking outside. Maybe it was just the old wood of the porch adjusting to the cold. But that thin hope evaporated around 3:40 a.m. when I woke to the soft sound of water dripping inside my room. Not outside, not on the roof, but inside, right next to the closet door. I sat up slowly, barely breathing, feeling the hair on my arms rise as another drop hit the floor. And in the dim glow from the streetlight leaking through the curtains, I saw it. A small, dark puddle forming on the wooden boards. Too dark to be regular water. Too thick, almost like lake water mixed with silt. I stared at the closet, my mind screaming not to move, not to make a sound. Because something about that puddle felt wrong. It wasn't spreading outward like normal water. It was spreading toward me, inching in a slow, deliberate line, as if being pulled by something unseen. I whispered no, no, no under my breath and slid out of bed, pressing my back against the far wall. The room felt colder than it should have, like the air was being drained. Then the closet door creaked, just a tiny shift, barely an inch, but it was enough for me to see pure blackness inside that wasn't just dark. It was the same color as the lake at night, that heavy, unnatural void that swallows light instead of hiding it. And then I heard it, a faint, wet step inside the closet, followed by another, like something tall was adjusting its weight. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and turned on the flashlight, pointing it at the closet, and for a split second I saw them the same 2 long footprints on the floorboards, but fresh this time, dripping. I panicked, bolted out of the room, down the hall, down the stairs, and out the front door before I even realized I wasn't wearing shoes. I jumped into my truck, locked the doors, and pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, trying to breathe. That's when I made my second mistake. I looked up. There, standing at the edge of the yard near the tree line, was the shape, the man, or the thing shaped like a man, motionless and upright, hands hanging too low, head tilted almost imperceptibly toward me. It wasn't on the lake this time. It was on the ground, on my property. And the worst part wasn't that it had followed me home. It was the fact that it had come closer since the last time. And this time there was no fog, no water's reflection, nothing to distort it. I saw it clearly, too clearly. Its legs didn't bend, its arms didn't sway. Its outline shimmered faintly like heat, haze, even though the night was cold. I started the truck, floored the gas, and didn't stop driving until I reached a motel 30 miles away. I kept the lights on all night. Every hour, I checked the window. Nothing. But at dawn, when I stepped outside to get some air, I found a long, wet smear on the pavement, leading straight to the door of my room, like something had stood there for a long time before the sun scared it off. I should have left town. I know that now. But I made the mistake of thinking the thing wouldn't follow me in daylight. So I drove back home around noon to grab some clothes and important documents. The house was silent, untouched, almost normal, until I walked into my bedroom. The puddle that had been creeping toward my bed was gone, but in its place was a single footprint, long and thin and perfectly dry, pressed into the dust on the floorboards like a signature. I backed out of the room and headed downstairs, planning to leave immediately. But the moment I reached the front door, the entire house went quiet, not regular quiet, but the suffocating, oppressive stillness I'd felt at the lake before the man first appeared. The air felt heavy again. The sunlight through the windows dimmed as if something had passed over it. And from the second floor, directly above where I stood, I heard a single, long, creaking step, not from the closet, not from the hall, from the ceiling, as if something impossibly tall was standing right above me. I didn't look up. I didn't breathe. I just ran. I drove until my gas tank nearly hit empty, stopped in another town, and checked into another motel with no idea what to do next. That was 2 days ago. I haven't gone home. I haven't slept. But tonight, while writing this, the room grew cold again, the same unnatural cold, and a few minutes ago I heard a soft tap on the window, just one, but unmistakable. And now, as I force myself to look, I can see a long, thin shadow on the pavement outside the motel, stretched toward my door, and it's not moving, it's waiting.